Welcome to HOA Justice Stories. This one escalated fast in the snow. The tow driver hooked my front wheel and Karen screamed that I had no right to dispute on site, and the car was leaving unless I paid the release fee immediately. "Stop arguing and start shoveling, or I will schedule your hearing," she barked, her breath fogging the air between us. I stood there in my driveway in Redmond, Washington at 7 in the morning after working a 12-hour night shift at the warehouse, staring at the yellow tow truck and the woman in the blue parka who had decided my snow-covered patio furniture was a violation of the Plowmark Park Homeowners Association Inter-storage rules. My hands were shaking, not from the cold, but from the adrenaline spiking through my exhaustion. I work nights. I need to sleep during the day, and Joan Collins, the HOA records custodian, had just decided that sleep was not in the budget today. Joan held up the laminated policy sheet like it was a warrant. "This is a safety hazard," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut the frozen air. "Snow-covered outdoor furniture must be stored or tarped within 48 hours of accumulation exceeding 2 inches. You have violated subsection 12.4. The fine is $250, and your car is being towed for obstructing emergency snow removal access." I looked at my sedan, parked exactly where it had been parked for 3 years, in my own driveway, nowhere near the street. "Emergency access," I repeated, my voice flat with disbelief. "My car is in my driveway." Joan's smile was tight and cold. "The association reserves the right to define obstruction during winter weather events. You were notified. I was not notified," I said, louder now, stepping closer. The tow driver, a guy in his 20s with a cigarette hanging from his lip, glanced between us and kept cranking the winch. Joan pulled out her phone and started snapping photos of me, of the furniture, of the car, her thumb moving fast across the screen. I stayed polite, because polite makes bullies careless, but inside I was screaming. The car lurched forward an inch. Joan stepped back and crossed her arms. "Release fee is $375, cash or certified check, payable within 2 hours or the car goes to impound and you add daily storage." I felt my jaw clench. "I am disputing this right now," I said. "You cannot tow my car from my own property without proper notice." Joan tilted her head, her red hair falling across one shoulder. "I have done this before and people fold every time," she said, her tone casual, almost bored. "You can dispute all you want, but the car is leaving unless you pay. The hearing is next Thursday at 7. If you want to argue, argue there." She turned and started walking toward her own car, a silver crossover parked on the street with the engine running. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Joan glanced back and her expression hardened. "Recording without consent is harassment," she snapped. "Washington is a two-party state for private conversations." I shot back, "But this is an HOA action on my property, which makes it a public interest matter. Keep talking." Her face flushed, and for a second I thought she might charge me, but instead she climbed into her crossover and slammed the door. The tow driver finished securing the chain and walked over. "Look, man," he said, voice low, "I just do what dispatch tells me. If you want to fight it, call the company." He handed me a greasy card with a phone number. I took it and watched him climb into the cab. My car rolled backward out of the driveway, front wheels off the ground, rear tires cutting tracks through the slush. I stood there in the cold, alone, holding my phone and a business card, listening to the tow truck's backup beeper fade down the block. Joan's crossover idled at the curb for another 30 seconds, then pulled away. I looked at the patio furniture, a cheap aluminum set I had bought at a closeout sale and forgotten about when the first snow hit 2 days ago. Snow-covered, sure, but hardly a safety hazard unless you were actively looking for reasons to screw someone over. I was trying to sell the house, and the HOA was threatening disclosures and liens that would kill the sale before it even started. I went inside and called my friend Marcus, who works in IT and has a knack for verifying metadata and timestamps. He picked up on the second ring. "What?" he said, voice groggy. "I just got towed by the HOA," I said. "I need you to pull the dispatch logs and call recordings if you can get them." Marcus groaned. "Dude, it is 7 in the morning. "I know," I said. "I work nights, remember? I have a delivery window for salt and sand, and if I miss it, stores will sell out, and now I do not have a car." There was a pause, then the sound of him sitting up. "Okay," he said. "Give me the tow company name and number." I read it off the card. Marcus tapped keys in the background. "This is going to take a couple hours," he said. "Go to sleep. I will call you when I have something." I hung up and collapsed on the couch, still in my coat, too wired to sleep but too exhausted to move. When I woke up, it was past noon and my phone was buzzing. "Marcus." I answered. "You are not going to believe this," he said. "The tow was ordered at 6:43 this morning by someone named Joan Collins, who identified herself as HOA enforcement. The dispatcher noted that the location was a private driveway, not a public street, and asked for verification of authority. Joan said she had board authorization under emergency winter rules." I sat up, adrenaline flooding back. "Did they confirm that?" Marcus laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "No," he said. "They took her word for it because she has called them before and paid on time. But here is the thing. The winter emergency rules she cited were not filed with the county until yesterday afternoon, and the notice requirement is 72 hours before enforcement. She backdated the violation." I felt my chest tighten. "She backdated it." Marcus made an affirmative noise. "She sent the violation notice to your address 2 days ago, but the document metadata shows it was created yesterday at 2:15 in the afternoon, 6 hours after the storm started." I leaned back and stared at the ceiling. "Can you send me that? All of it?" "Already in your email," Marcus said. "Logs, recordings, metadata report, the whole package." "I owe you," I said. "You owe me sleep," he replied, and hung up. I opened my laptop and started going through the files. The dispatch audio was gold. Joan's voice, clipped and authoritative, saying she had board approval and the car was obstructing emergency access. The dispatcher, a woman with a tired voice, asking if the owner had been notified. Joan saying yes, notification was sent per policy, everything is documented. Then the kicker, the dispatcher saying okay, but if this gets disputed, you might have to provide that documentation. Joan's reply, smooth and confident, "I have done this before and people fold every time." I played it 3 times, feeling the slow burn of anger settle into something colder and sharper. She had said it on a recorded line, to a third party, with zero idea it would come back. I stayed polite, because polite makes bullies careless, and Joan had just handed me the knife. I called the tow company and got transferred 4 times before reaching someone who could talk about the release. The fee was now $450 because I had missed the 2-hour window and the car had been moved to the impound lot. I explained that the tow was unauthorized and I had proof. The woman on the phone, who sounded like she had heard this exact speech 1,000 times, said I could dispute it with the HOA, but the car was not leaving the lot until someone paid. I asked if I could pay under protest and get a receipt showing the charge was disputed. She sighed and said yes. I grabbed my wallet, called a rideshare, and headed to the impound lot in the cold drizzle that had replaced the morning snow. The impound lot was a fenced gravel yard behind a truck repair shop, surrounded by snowbanks and lit by harsh overhead lights even though it was the middle of the day. I paid in cash, got my receipt, and drove my car out of there with the radio off, hands tight on the wheel, mind running through the next steps. The hearing was Thursday, 5 days away. I had the recordings. I had the metadata. I had Marcus as a witness who could testify to the timestamps. And I had Joan's own voice saying she had done this before and people fold. I was not going to fold. That night I got a notification on my phone from the Plomark Park Homeowners Association neighborhood group chat. Someone had posted a photo of my driveway with the patio furniture still covered in snow, and a caption that read, "This is what happens when you ignore safety rules during a storm." Some people think the rules do not apply to them. The post had 17 reactions and 3 comments, all from people I had never met, calling me selfish and irresponsible. I screenshotted it, saved it to a folder, and did not reply. Joan was escalating, painting me as a hazard during a storm, and she was doing it in public where I could document every word. The next day I got a letter in the mail, a certified envelope with snow-wet corners and the Plomark Park HOA return address. Inside was a formal notice of violation for failure to comply with winter storage requirements, a $250 fine, and a separate notice of non-compliance for obstructing emergency snow removal, with an additional $300 fine. Both were dated 3 days earlier, before the storm, but the postmark on the envelope was from yesterday. I took photos of everything: the envelope, the postmark, the letters, the metadata mismatch. Joan was sloppy, and sloppy was good for me. I called the HOA management company, a regional firm that handled a dozen neighborhoods in the area, and asked to speak to someone about disputing the fines. I got transferred to a compliance manager named Derek, who sounded young and deeply uninterested. He pulled up my account and confirmed the fines were on record. I explained that the notices were backdated and the enforcement was improper. Derek made a non-committal sound. "You can dispute it at the hearing," he said. Thursday at 7, the clubhouse. I asked if Joan Collins would be there. He paused. "Joan is the records custodian," he said carefully. "She usually attends hearings where documents are in question." I asked if the board president would be there. Another pause. "The board president is aware of the situation," Derek said. "I am not at liberty to discuss board deliberations." I thanked him and hung up, feeling the shape of the problem getting clearer. The board knew Joan was out of line, but they were not going to stop her unless someone forced their hand. I spent the next 2 days gathering everything I could. I pulled county records showing when the winter emergency rules were filed. I got a statement from Marcus confirming the metadata discrepancies and offering to testify. I printed the dispatch logs and the recording transcripts. I compiled the group chat posts into a timeline showing Joan's campaign to frame me as a public hazard. I even tracked down the neighbor who had been walking his dog that morning and asked if he would be willing to confirm what he saw. His name was Ed, a retired guy in his 60s who lived 3 houses down. He said he had watched the whole thing and thought it was ridiculous. I asked if he would come to the hearing. He said he would think about it, which I took as a soft no, but I gave him my number anyway. Wednesday afternoon I got another notification, this time an email from the HOA management company. Subject line, "Final notice, compliance required." The body of the email said that my failure to resolve the violations had triggered a collections referral, and that the association was proceeding with a lien filing unless I paid the fines in full within 24 hours. I stared at the screen, feeling the trap close tighter. Joan was threatening to send collections even though the fees were disputed and under appeal, and she was doing it 48 hours before the hearing where I was supposed to be able to argue my case. I forwarded the email to Marcus and called him. "This is insane," I said. "They cannot file a lien while the dispute is active." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Technically they can," he said. "It is shady as hell, but HOAs have a lot of latitude. You need to get this in front of a judge, or at least get it documented at the hearing that they are retaliating." I asked if he could come to the hearing. He said yes. Thursday came. I got home from my shift at 6, showered, changed into clean clothes, and drove to the clubhouse with a folder full of documents and a pit in my stomach. The clubhouse was a low brick building at the edge of the neighborhood, surrounded by a snowy parking lot and a few sad evergreen shrubs. Inside, the air smelled like old carpet and burnt coffee. The meeting room was a rectangle with folding tables arranged in a U shape and a podium at the front. Joan was already there, sitting at one of the side tables with her snow-soaked notebook open in front of her, writing something in tight, angry script. She glanced up when I walked in and her face went flat. I took a seat across from her and set my folder on the table. Marcus arrived a few minutes later and sat beside me. Joan watched him, then looked back at her notebook and kept writing. The board president, a man in his 50s with thinning gray hair and a permanent frown, called the meeting to order at 7 exactly. There were 3 other board members present, all looking like they would rather be anywhere else. The president read the agenda in a monotone. First item: violation hearing for the property at 42 Snow Ridge Lane. Winter storage non-compliance and emergency access obstruction. He looked at me. You have 15 minutes to present your case. I stood up, opened my folder, and started laying out the documents. I explained the timeline, the backdated notices, the metadata discrepancies, the unauthorized tow, the dispatch recordings. I played the audio clip of Joan saying I have done this before and people fold every time. The room went quiet. One of the board members, a woman in her 40s, leaned forward and frowned. Joan, is this accurate? Joan did not look up from her notebook. The recordings are out of context, she said. I followed procedure. The board president cleared his throat. The procedure requires 72 hours notice before enforcement, he said carefully. These notices were filed with the county less than 72 hours before the tow. Joan's pen stopped moving. She looked up, her face tight. The storm was an emergency, she said. The rules allow expedited enforcement during emergencies. I pulled out the county filing receipt and handed it to the president. The emergency rules were filed at 2:15 in the afternoon the day of the storm, I said. The tow happened at 6:43 the next morning. That is 16 hours, not 72. And the violation notices I received were backdated to before the rules even existed. The president looked at Joan. She crossed her arms. This is a clerical error, she said. The intent of the rules was clear. I will make an example out of you so everyone learns, I said, quoting her directly from the group chat post. That was your language, Joan. You said it in the neighborhood forum and you said it on the dispatch call. This is not about safety, this is about control. Joan's face went red. You are twisting my words, she snapped. I am trying to protect this community. The woman board member raised her hand. Joan, she said quietly, did you authorize the tow without board approval? Joan hesitated. The rules give the record's custodian discretion during emergencies, she said. That was a yes, the board president said, his tone flat. You acted without authorization. Joan stood up, her notebook clutched to her chest. I have been doing this job for 6 years, she said, her voice rising. I have kept this neighborhood safe and compliant, and now you are going to side with someone who could not even tarp his patio furniture? The board president held up a hand. Joan, sit down. She did not sit. You are making a mistake, she said. If you let him off, everyone will think they can ignore the rules. I stayed quiet, watching the board members exchange glances. The president looked down at the documents I had provided, then back at Joan. We are going to take a 5-minute recess, he said. Joan, I need you to step outside. Joan stared at him, then at me, then grabbed her notebook and walked out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frame. The board members huddled at the far end of the table, speaking in low voices. Marcus leaned over and whispered, You have them." I nodded, but I did not relax. The door opened and Ed, the neighbor with the dog, walked in, looking sheepish. "Sorry I am late," he said. Traffic was bad. I felt a surge of relief. Ed took a seat beside Marcus. The board members returned to their spots. The president cleared his throat. "We have reviewed the evidence," he said. "The fines are being rescinded and the tow fees will be reimbursed by the association. Joan Collins will be placed on administrative leave pending a review of enforcement procedures." I felt the tension drain out of my shoulders. "Thank you," I said. The president nodded. "We apologize for the inconvenience," he said stiffly. "This should not have happened." Joan came back in as the meeting was adjourning. Her face was pale and her mouth was a thin line. She walked to her seat, picked up her notebook, and looked directly at me. "This is not over," she said. The board president stood. "Joan, if you continue to engage in retaliatory behavior, you will be removed from your position." She did not reply, just turned and walked out. The door swung shut behind her. I collected my documents, thanked Marcus and Ed, and left the clubhouse feeling like I had just survived a car wreck. But Joan was not done. 2 days later, I came home to find a notice taped to my front door. It was a new violation, this time for unshoveled sidewalks, with a $50 fine. I took a photo of my sidewalk, which I had shoveled that morning, and sent it to the HOA management company with a note saying this was retaliation. Derek called me an hour later. "I am aware of the situation," he said. "The board has instructed Joan to cease all enforcement actions related to your property. I will remove the fine." I asked if there was any accountability for Joan filing false violations. Derek sighed. "That is between Joan and the board," he said. "I suggest you document everything and consider filing a formal complaint." I hung up and did exactly that. The formal complaint process took 3 weeks and involved 2 more meetings, a written statement from Marcus and a recorded statement from Ed. During that time, Joan continued her silent campaign. I got anonymous messages in the group chat suggesting I was a troublemaker. I got an email from someone claiming to be a concerned neighbor asking if I was planning to move soon because the neighborhood did not need people who could not follow rules. I ignored all of it and kept building my file. By the end of the month, the board had removed Joan from her position as records custodian and reassigned her to a non-enforcement role. The HOA also issued a written apology and sent me a check for the tow fees, the impound fees, and $100 for my trouble. It was not enough, but it was something. The real payoff came 2 months later. I was at the mailbox cluster, the unofficial courtroom of the neighborhood, when I overheard 2 women talking about the annual meeting. One of them said Joan had tried to run for board president and got destroyed in the vote. Apparently, someone had read the dispatch recordings into the meeting minutes during the nomination process, and the room had reacted exactly how you would expect. Joan's bluff gets read out loud and the room reacts, one woman said, laughing. She left halfway through. I smiled and kept sorting my mail. A few weeks after that, the board passed a new policy prohibiting retaliatory enforcement and requiring board approval for all winter emergency actions. They also adopted a statute citation read into the minutes that shuts the threat down, specifically referencing the 72-hour notice requirement and the county filing deadlines. It was a quiet victory, but it felt like vindication. I sold the house in March and moved to a neighborhood without an HOA. The new place has a long driveway, no shared amenities, and neighbors who wave but do not enforce anything. It is quieter, and I sleep better. I still have the folder with all the documents, the recordings, the metadata reports, the timeline. I keep it in a box in the garage not because I think I will need it again, but because it reminds me that polite persistence and a good paper trail can beat a bully every time. Joan is still in the neighborhood as far as I know, but she is not in charge anymore. The board refunded the snow-related fines and fees, and the management company flagged her file so she could not pull the same stunt on anyone else. It was not a perfect ending, but it was enough. The funny thing is, I never did tarp the patio furniture. I sold it on a local classified site the week after the hearing, and the buyer hauled it away in a pickup truck. Joan drove past while they were loading it, and I waved. She did not wave back. I hope your fines stay at 0.